FR 20336, October 20, 1971, as amended at 38 FR 30, 38 at Federal Registry at 875 January 1973, 38 FR 1508 in January 15, 1973, 213 115 rail mismatch. Any mismatch rails of joints may be not more than prescribed as the following: class 1, 1 through 6. On the trend of the rail ends of 1/2. On the gauge of the side of the railway ends of 1/2. 2 is in 1/8 of an inch. 3 is in. I'm sorry, these are too small. Print rail-ended batter. A rail-ended batter is the depth of depression of 1/2 inches more rail-ended measured by placing the 18th inch straight-headed edge of the tread on the rail end without bridging or joining, measuring the distance between the bottom of the straight edge. At the top of the rail and 1/2 inch of the rail end of the rail batter may not be more than prescribed in the following table: 1 through class through 6, and inches rail end batter may not be more than 1/2 inches to a couple something sixteenths. 213 119 continuous weld. When a continuous weld is being installed, it must not be installed and adjusted by rail temperature and range that should not result in compressive or tensile forces that will produce lateral displacement of the track, pulling apart of the rail ends of the welds. And after continuous weld has been installed, should not be disturbed as rail temperature is higher than its installation temperatures. 213 121. Each rail joint is insulated. Compromise must be of the proper design dimension of the rail of which it was applied. If a joint bar is in class 3 through the track is cracked, broken, and because of the wear allows vertical movement of either of the rail with it, all bolts are tightened, it must be replaced. If a joint bar is cracked or broken between the middle of 2 bolts, it must be replaced. In case of conventional joint track, each rail must be bolted at least 2 bolts in each joint. Classes 2 through 6 track without at least 1 bolt in class 1. Each case of continuous weld rail track, each rail must be bolted in at least 2 bolts in each joint. Each joint bar must be held in a position of track bolts tighten, allowing the joint bar to firmly support an abutting rail ends to allow longitude movement, and rail joint accommodated expansions contractual due to the temperature variations within when outface and non-slip joint rail contact exists for design requirements of this paragraph to do. 213 123 not applying the location considering the continuous weld. The railroad track must meet all requirements. Continuous weld track prescribed as on this part. No rail or angle bar having torch cut burn bolt hole may be used in class 3 through 6 track. Tie plates class 3 through 6 track with timber cross ties are used. There must be a tie plates under the running rails at least 8 inches or at least 8 of the consecutive ties. Tie plates have shoulders and must be placed, and no part than shoulder is used under the base of the rail. 213 125. Longitude rail movement must be effective, controlled, and rail anchors which bear on the sides of the ties are used used for this purpose. They must be on the same side of the tie of the rail, both rails. 213 127. The conventional track is used in timber ties and cut track spikes. The rails must be spiked to the ties with at least 1 holding spike. The gauge side 1 on lining holding the spike on the field side, and the total number of the track per rail per tie, including plate holding spike, must be at least the number prescribed in the following table. Minimum number of the track spikes per rail per tie, including the plate holding spikes. Class of the track: tangent track and curved track within no more than 2 inches of curvature. Curvature track with more than 2 inches, more than 4 of the curvature, 4 degrees of the curvature. Curvature track with more than 4 inches, but not more than 6 degrees of curve. Curved track with more than 6 degrees of curve. Class 1 track, as in 2 inches within 2 inches of curve. 4 inches, 4 degrees. He has 2 inches in the 4-degree curve, and in 6-degree curve 2 inches, and curve and over 2 inches 126. or curve class 2, the 2 degrees of curve and 2 inches, and 4 degrees of curve 2 inches, 6 degrees of curve 2 inches, curvatures of 6, 3, 3, class of 3, class of track 3, 2 degrees, 2 inches, 2 inches and more, 4 degrees, 6 degrees of curve, 2 degrees, or 3 degrees over 6 degrees of curve, 4, 2 degrees, 2 degrees and 3 degrees, 5, class 5, 3 degrees and 3 degrees, or 2 degrees and 3 degrees, class 6, 2 degrees. If the tie does not meet The tie that does not meet the requirements of the paragraph A and of these sections considered to be defective of the purpose 213.109 and B 36 FR and 20336 October 20th 1971 added amended 38 FR 876 joined January 5th 1973 213 of 129 track shims. The track does not meet the geometric standard of support of C and working of ballast and non-position due to weather and other natural conditions. Track shims may not be installed and correct deficiencies in shims are used must be removed and track resurfaced as soon as weather and other natural conditions are permit. When the shims are used, it must be at least one side of the tie plate inserted directly onto the top beneath the rail of the plate, spiked directly on the tie. Spikes and penetrate of the tie at least 4 inches. When the rail is shimmed more than 1.5 inches, it must circularly brace at least every third tie of the full length of the shimming. When the rail is shimmed more than 2 inches, the combination of shim 2 inches and 4 inches of plank that is caused and must be used in shims on the top of the planks. 213.131 plank used in shimming. Planks used in shimming must not always be let in tie plates, but not less than in case of the 5.5 inches wide. Whenever the possible, then must be extended for the full length of the tie. A plank is shorter than the tie is more than at least 3 feet of the longer and is outer at the end of the flush of the end of the tile. When the planks are used in shimming uneven on two rails and shimmed unevenly, in addition to shim makers, shims may be placed in the ties planks under the rails and compensate for the unevenness. Planks must be nailed to the ties at least 8 inches wire spikes before spiking the rail and shimming braces. Planks must be bored to 5/8 of an inch hole. 213.133 turnouts and crossing generals and turnouts, track crossings and fastening and being intact and maintained and keep the components and securely in place and all each is switch frog guardrail and must be kept in obstruction that may be interfere with the passage wheels. Classes 4 through the track must be equipped for the rail anchors through the one each side of the rail or each side of the track crossing turnout and restraints of all rail movement affecting a position of the switch points and frogs. Each flange way of the turnouts and the track crossing must be at least 1.5 inches wide. 36 FR 20336 October 20th 1971 at amended 38 degrees Fahrenheit Federal Registry 876 January 5 1973. That'd be 213.135 switches. Each stock rail must be circularly seated and switch plates must be used in avoiding canting of the rail, over tightening of the rail braces. Each switch point must be filled in its rail properly and switch and stand either in the closed position to allow all wheels and switch positions laterally, vertically movement in stock rail and switch plates of the switch plates. It must be adversely affected to fit the switch point to the stock rail. A switch must be maintained so that the outer edge of the wheel tread cannot be contacted with the gauge side of the stock rail. The heel each of the switch rail must be secure. The bolts and each heel must be kept tightly. Each switch stands connecting to the rod securely fastened and operable without excessive loss of motion. Even throw lever must be maintained even if it is not and cannot be operated in lock and keeper in place. Early switch position indicator must be clearly visible at all times. Unusual chipped and be worn in switch points and repaired to replace and metal flow must be removed and ensure proper closure. In 213.1376, the flange weight depth and measure of plane across the wheel bearings are in the frog of class 1 track may not be less than 1 3/8 of an inch and less than 1.5 inches of class 2 and class 3. And the frog point chip broken and worn in the 5/8 of an inch and down in 6 inches. Operating speed of the frog may not be more than 10 miles per hour and the tread portion of the frog casting is worn down more than 3/8 of an inch below the original contour, operating speeding of the frog may not be more than 10 miles per hour. 213, 139 spring rail frogs. The outer side of the edge of the wedge thread may not contact the gauge side of the spring wing rail. The toe of each wing rail must be solidly tamped and fully tightly bolted. Each frog at the bolt hole and head web separate and must be replaced. Each spring must have tension sufficient to hold the wing rail and against the point in it rail. The clearance between the holding down and housing and horn may not be more than 1/4 of an inch. 213 141 self-guard. The raised guarded a self-guarded frog may not be worn more than 3/8 of an inch, and repairs are made in self-guarded frog which removing the fronting surface of guard face and must be restored to the rebuilding of this point. Frog guard rail and guard faces gauge. The guard check and guard face for gauges must be within the limits prescribed as the following table. 213-201 guard check gauge and guard face gauge, the class 1 through 6. The distance between the gauge line of the frog and the guard line and the guard line of the guard rail and the guarding face pressure measure tracted at the right of the angles at the gauge line must be less than 4/16 and a half an inch or 4 foot and 5 and a quarter. I can't read the fraction, but we'll go from 4 1/8 and a 4 foot and 4 foot 6 and 4 and a fifth and 4 6 to 4 and a 5 and 4 6 to 4 and a 5. It's in class 5 and 6. 3 is a little over. A line along the side of the flangeway, which is nearer to the center of the track at the same elevation of the gauge line, a line below the top of the center and on the head of the running rail, considering the location of the treaded portion of the track's structure. Subpart E, the track appliances and track related devices. 213-201. Subpart prescribes the minimum requirements for certain track appliances, track related devices. 213-205. Derails. Each derail must be clearly visible when where in the lock position of the derail must be freely, and any lost position within would allow it to be operated without moving the lock. When the lever of the remotely controlled derail is operated and latched, and must be actually actuate the derail. 213 and 207. The spring heaters. The operation of the spring heater must interfere with the proper operation of the switch, otherwise jeopardizing safety of the railroad equipment. Subpart F, an inspection. 213-231. The subpart prescribes and requires the frequency and manners inspection to defect deviations as standard prescribed in this part. 213-233 track inspection. All tracks are inspected in accordance to schedule prescribed. In paragraph in the section, person designated under 213.17 and each inspection must be made on the floor deriding on the track vehicle at a speed allows the person making an inspection at a visual inspect of the track showing the compliance within the part. This part is, however, the mechanical, electrical, or the track inspection device may be used in supplemented visual inspection. The vehicle is visual inspection if a vehicle is used for the visual inspection, the speed of the vehicle may not be more than 5 miles per hour. Then passing over the track, crossing highway crossing and out, or the switching. Each track inspection must be made according to the following schedule: Class 1 and 2 and 3 type of track, main track and slidings, weekly at the least of 3 calendar days interval with between the inspection before each track in use in less than once in a week, or in twice weekly at the least of calendar day interval with between the inspections. And if the track carries the passenger trains of more than 10 million gross tons of traffic during the procedures calendar year 1, 2, 3, other than the mainline track and siding, monthly at least 20 calendar days interval between inspections. 4, 5, 6 total weeks within at least 1 calendar day interval between the inspections. Yeah, and if the person makes an inspection finds a deviation from the requirements, these shall immediately initiate the remedial action. Switch track cross-section inspection, except for the provided paragraph in the section in each switch and track section must be inspected at least a month. In case of the track is used less than 1 month, each switch of the track crossing must be inspected 1 foot before it is used. 213-237 inspection. In addition to the trans inspection required 213-233, and at least once a year, a continuous search of internal defects must be made. All jointed welded rails classes 4 through 6 track Class 3 over the passenger train operating. However, if in the case of a new rail before the installation of 6 months, therefore effective and inductive and ultrasonic inspected the entire length of all defects removed, the new continuous search of internal defects is not to be made by 3 years after the inspection. B. Inspection equipment must be capable of detecting defects in between joint bars in the area enclosed in the joint bars. Each defective rail must be marked in highly visible marking on the both sides of the web in the base. 36 FR and 20336 in October 20th, 1971, amending the 38th of the Federal Registry of 876 and January 5th, 1973. The special inspections in the event of the fire flood served form other than occurrence within the mighty of the damaged truck as structure. Special inspection must be made of the track involved as soon as possible after the occurrence. Inspection records each owner of the track to which the applies within the keep the record inspection required to the performed on the track under the subpart. Each record of an inspection of 213 to 233 to 213 to 235 shall be prepared on the daily inspection made and signed, and making the inspection recorded to the specifically tracked and inspected date of the inspection, location, nature of the deviation requirements of the part, the remedial action taken by the person making the inspection, and the owner shall retain the record of division of headquarters at least 1 year after the inspection covered by the record. Rail inspection records must be specifically dated. Inspection of location, nature of the internal rail defects found, and remedial action taken date and thereof, and the owner shall retain the rail inspection record at least 2 years, and the inspection for at least 1 year remedial action is taken. Each owner required to keep the inspection recorded under this section shall be making the record available for the inspection copying for Federal Railroad Administration. The degrees of curvature through 0 through 6 inches out of the rail out of the maximum allowable operation speeds. 0 to 30 degrees, or degrees of curvature 0 to 43, and I'm not going to read that. And a maximum allowing operating speeds of the degree of curvature. Appendix B, Schedule for Civil Penalties, reflects a statement of policy, Federal Railroad Administration, and maximum applicable 213 specific civil penalty in violation of a particular section of this part. And here's a violation in the hazardous violation. It gives parts that are broken from 213.5 to 213.241. Note this purposes of appendix of the hazardous violation is in violation of immediate death or injury. When in the actual accident, death of the injury results in violation, the administration of the authority to assess the maximum penalty of $25,000 of violation of any section of subsection of Part 213. That's 39 FNR 1235-1 APR 1974. This is Appendix C. Is a glossary, and I'll stop there.